Walters will be open at 10 a.m. for opening day on Monday, well ahead of the 4:05 start against the Pirates. Plus, make Walters your spot to watch the NCAA tournament if you're down in Navy Yard.
Huh.
Watching Kyle's unboxing videos again?
Yeah, he always finds the coolest... No way! A robot dog? Gotta ask where he got it.
Or use your Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Just draw a circle around the dog on your screen, and it shows you where to buy it right in the app.
Whoa, I just learned a new trick. And that for once, I beat Kyle to the next big thing.
Circle it, find it with the new Galaxy S24 Ultra and circle the search with Google. Get yours now at Samsung.com. Internet connection required. Results may vary based on visuals.
Abrams well toward the middle. Vargas well off the line. And a swing and a drive hit to deep right field. Way back. Going. And gone. Goodbye. That one is halfway up the stands in straightaway right field. A long home run for Nick Martini, who gets a hold of a slider over the middle of the plate. A 2-run homer makes for a 3-run inning for Cincinnati. It's the Reds 3 and the Nationals nothing.
Gray to the belt. He lets it fly. Swinging a long drive to right center field again. Back Thomas to the wall looking up. He's done it again. Nick Martini has a 3-run homer at 7-0 Cincinnati. His first 2 at-bats of the season. He has 2 homers and 5 RBIs against Josiah Gray.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Friday, March 29th. 2024, along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is at Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi podcast. Well, it was only one game, so we must remain calm. We must engage in sober, rational analysis, not emotional, hyper-reactionary analysis. But yeah, that game was not pretty. An 8-2 loss at the Cincinnati Reds on Thursday, what was opening day for the 20th season of Nationals baseball. A lot to get to. We do want to tell you that this episode of the podcast for opening day is brought to you by Mason Kalfas at Zenith Legal. Mason Kalfas and his team specialize in placing partners and associates at medium-sized and large law firms in Washington, D.C. and across the country. Mason's number is 202-486-3535. You could also visit his website, zenithlegal.com. Also, we this season are offering something new, paid shout-outs. If you want to wish someone a happy birthday or wish someone well or congratulate someone or whatever, we will put forth a shout-out for you on the podcast. Email Tim Shovers at natschatpodcast@gmail.com. And we are now on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Nats Chat. Our YouTube handle is at Nats Chat Podcast. And please consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. Cost you nothing, but subscriptions help out the podcast a lot. Well, here's all that you need to know about the Nationals 2024 opening day. Their new starting third baseman got injured before the game. Nick Senzel, he for the game was to be the Nats starting third baseman and number 8 batter, but he was a late scratch due to suffering a broken right thumb while fielding a grounder prior to the game. Ildemaro Vargas ended up being the Nats starting third baseman and number 8 batter. But Mark, a tone for the day was set, and that tone was abided by with what ended up happening in that game.
I mean, just think about the first, hour of baseball and what preceded it before this game out. I mean, you're never going to be more optimistic than you are on opening day. And within an hour, your starting third baseman broke his thumb before even getting to take the field for good. Your opening day starter gave up 7 runs in the first 3 innings, and your lineup did almost nothing against the opposing team's starter. You want to drop a worst case scenario. This is pretty close to it. Now, doesn't necessarily have any reflection on what's going to happen on Saturday and beyond. This is an isolated incident, one game. And as upsetting as it was to see Nick Senzel get hurt like that, I think we know where he stands on this team, both in the short term and the long term. There were far more prominent players who could have gotten hurt than Nick Senzel. But just on an emotional level, this was probably the most demoralizing opening day this team has had in a long time. It's not the most lopsided loss. That was 2010 against the Phillies when they lost 11-1. But I think emotionally, it kind of takes you back to that time period. And, That's very unfortunate. Again, we'll see what happens the rest of the weekend, but with no game to play on Friday, that's a good 48 hours to stew over this one, and that's not the way you want to spend those 48 hours.
Yeah, and it was a game that featured so many familiar problems. Weak offense, base running blunder, starting pitching that did not go the way that you wanted the starting pitching to go. But with this Senzel situation, so it's a broken right thumb. I mean, he's going to miss at least some time. Davey Martinez, during his postgame session with you guys, openly talked about a move is coming.
But we definitely need another body. So, we're going to sit back and see what we're going to do.
If we were weeks into the regular season, we could maybe have the Brady House conversation. But geez, the darn regular season just started. Any sense on what that roster move might be?
Well, I think the fascinating question is going to be, Trey Lipscomb was this close to making the opening day roster. He's actually more of a natural third baseman than a second baseman. He won the Gold Glove there in the minor leagues last year. Will they just go ahead and make that move? He's already been announced as making the Rochester opening day roster along with James Wood. Would they just place the call to him and say, hey, come on down and you can make your major league debut Saturday, and we're going to, instead of having you play second base, which was the plan, interestingly enough, that they wanted him to play mostly second base at Rochester, we're actually going to put you at third base and let you just off and flying and see how it goes. So there's certainly a case to be made for that. And if he was really that close to making the opening day roster, then you would think that would mean that they would want to make that move, because he would be playing every day, probably for at least a month, if not more. Now, that said, I could see them also saying, okay, why didn't he make the opening day roster? If they don't believe that he's truly big league ready yet, or if they are concerned about service time, which is a fair thing for them to consider early in the season, you could say to yourself, Ildemaro Vargas is going to play a really solid third base. We know he's not going to hit a whole lot, but we know he's going to be good in the field. He's done it before. He can take over in the short term until we have a better sense how long Senzel is out, or until Lipscomb gets a chance to play a little bit at AAA where he has never played before. And then you call up somebody else just to fill out the bench, like a Jake Alou, Alex Call, Jacob Young, somebody like that who's just truly a bench player taking over. I could see them going either way with this. They've got some time to decide this. They don't have to do it right away. I know fans are going to immediately say, I've already heard it from everyone, call up Trey. I get that. And I think in some sense it does make sense to do that. But I could understand their line of reasoning if they decide not to do it quite yet and say, let's give him a couple weeks to see how he fares at AAA. They can still make that move maybe even before Senzel comes back. You don't necessarily have to do it immediately right now.
Hey Nats Chat, Tim Shovers here. Thanks for coming back for another season. Quick update after we taped. Andrew Golden of the Washington Post reported that indeed Trey Lipscomb is being called up to take Nick Senzel's roster spot. He'll be with the team on Saturday in Cincinnati. Now back to the show.
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come down to what you just talked about, which is what was the true reason for Trey Lipscomb not beginning the regular season at the major league level. I mean, I know pregame Davey talked about Nasim Nunez, the Rule 5 draftee, and hey, maybe it's as simple as that. Because of the Rule 5 rules, Nunez, you want to keep up at the major league level, and so Lipscomb was a victim of that. If it's as simple as that, then yeah, you bring Lipscomb up. But if they do, for whatever reason, have concerns about him playing at the major league level right now, I'm not sure why necessarily you would, but if they do, then maybe he doesn't come up. But man, right away, before game one starts, you are confronted with a roster scenario. But, you know, as interesting as the Nick Senzel situation is, opening day really in a lot of ways was about what happened with Josiah Gray. He ended up being the first man not named Steven Strasburg, Max Scherzer, or Patrick Corbin to be the Nats' opening day starting pitcher since 2011. This was a big deal that Josiah Gray was the Nats' opening day starter for this season, but he was not good on Thursday. 7 runs in 4 innings. He gave up 8 hits, 2 one-out home runs by Nick Martini, 3 doubles and 3 singles. He issued 2 walks, Gray did record 6 strikeouts. He over his 4 innings threw 80 pitches. Did have a strikes to balls ratio of nearly 2-1, 52 strikes versus 28 balls. And he did retire the final 5 batters he faced. So there were some positives. But, you know, look, there's not much of a happy face that you can put on 7 runs in 4 innings. Gray in the bottom of the second allowed 3 runs, gave up a 1-out, 2-run homer by Nick Martini on a bomb to right field for a 3-0 Reds lead. And Gray in the bottom of the third allowed 4 runs, including giving up a 1-out, 3-run homer by Nick Martini to right center field for a 7-0 Reds lead. So something on which Gray improved so much last season. The home run ball was back to being an issue on Thursday. And you, during your post-game chatter with Davey Martinez, brought up pitch selection, which has come up off and on in recent seasons. Davey Martinez in post-game sessions being critical of starters for their pitch selections in games. And Davey was not thrilled.
He's got to use his fastball, and he's got to throw more changeups.
With Josiah's pitch selection on Thursday.
Yeah, correct. And he pointed to the first inning and the fourth inning, which were good innings. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first inning he had the leadoff walk, which probably shouldn't have been a walk because ball 4 was pretty clearly in the zone, but then retired the side after that with a couple of strikeouts. And, I need to go back and actually watch it to see if this was true, but Davey believed that Gray was using his fastball much more in those 2 innings, the first inning and the fourth inning, and that he got away from it some in the second and the third. Now, we know that the fastball is Gray's kind of kryptonite pitch that he isn't always confident in. We've seen him at times abandon it altogether and go to nothing but breaking balls and off-speed pitches, and he has somehow found some success at times doing that. I don't know if that was necessarily the case here because I think he did throw strikes, as you pointed out, and so I don't think there was a fastball command issue necessarily. But both the home runs came with him behind in the count. And the first one, it registered as a slider. Gray called it a cutter afterwards, so it is something in between a fastball and a slider. But then the second one was on a curveball, a 2-0 curveball. And these are pitches that were right there in the zone. They're not starting in the zone and breaking out of it or just nipping the edges. These were right there over the plate. And I think that's the biggest issue. If you're going to get beat with your best stuff. And at least the way Davey describes it, he felt like the fastball was a better pitch for him today. And they continually are pounding it in him to try to do more to establish that fastball and throw the other stuff maybe when you're ahead in the count, but not necessarily behind in the count. So I thought that was disappointing, but it's more than the 2 home runs. I mean, there were a lot of base runners that led up to both of those. And while he didn't walk a whole lot, he only walked 2 batters. That's a good sign for him. He was giving up some pretty solid contact there, especially in the third inning leading up to the second homer.
Well, Josiah Gray's first start last regular season, 5 runs in 5 innings. Not good. Ended up having a nice step forward season. So, to the point of earlier in the show, it's just one game. Yes, it is just one game, but not what you wanted to see. And Josiah Gray, I mean, it just was not the Josiah Gray who we've come to know. There was a shot, I don't know if it was a video or a photo, but Andrew Golden of the Post put up prior to the game of Gray all by his lonesome walking the field at Great American Ballpark. And we know that he thinks a lot, right? And you wonder what he was thinking prior to that game. And, who knows? Maybe he just had a bad game. Maybe he overthought stuff. Maybe he did feel the pressure of opening day. Remember, that did come up last year as a reason for him not being the opening game starter, the pressure of opening day. So who knows? I mean, we're not mind readers, but disappointing to see. And, that pitch selection thing is so interesting to me because Davey isn't critical often, as we talk about, but he's brought this up multiple times in recent years. And I don't get why this is such an issue. He's the manager. Why can't he get guys to select the pitches that he as the manager wants them to select? I know that, he doesn't want to be necessarily like a dictator in the dugout, but, you're running the ball club. I mean, if you want guys to pitch a certain way, you should be able to impose that on your pitcher, shouldn't you?
Yeah, but he's also trusting his catcher and then ultimately his pitcher who can either shake him off or not to know how to call a game. You don't want to be calling every pitch from the dugout, but, they have conversations in the dugout between innings. And I think he tries to get the point across. And maybe we saw that by the time he finally got to the fourth inning in this one. But you're right. It's always frustrating to see the same points raised over and over again and feel like, well, why is nothing changing there? He brought up, in addition to the fastball stuff, they want him to throw more changeups, something they've been talking about forever, not just with him, but with a lot of guys. And he only threw 3 of them in this game. Now, I mean, Josiah Gray threw 7 different types of pitches in 4 innings on opening day. It's a lot. I think, as we all know, that's sort of who he is, but you also need to refine that to some extent. You got to figure out, who are you as a pitcher? What do you throw? What do you throw well? And when do you need to throw certain things? And if you're already throwing the kitchen sink at them on opening day, that, to me says there's a little bit of lack of confidence in something that he was throwing. And so I don't feel like that's a viable long-term plan for him. Maybe someday when he's, 37 and hanging on like Anibal Sanchez did, then you become that guy. But at this stage of his career, still early on, I feel like you should be more of a, 3 to 4 pitch, at least focusing on that. You don't have to throw everything all the time.
Yeah, less can be more, as the saying goes.
Football season may be over, but the action on the floor is heating up. Whether it's tournament season or the fight for the playoff home court, there's no shortage of high-stakes basketball moments this time of year. Get in on the excitement with Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app, where you can turn your hoops knowledge into serious cash. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So for basketball games, this means if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. Download the app today and use the code BLUEWIRE for a first deposit match up to $100. That code is BLUEWIRE for a first deposit match of up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
Hey, are you a law firm partner or an associate stuck on an underperforming franchise? Do what Nationals legend Max Scherzer did. Demand a trade. There might be greener pastures and a lot more money at another law firm for you and your team at another law firm, not to mention better management and better services to offer your clients. The law firm lateral partner market is still red hot, and Nats Chat sponsor Mason Kalfas is the best legal recruiter in Washington, D.C., or anywhere. And Mason wants to help you find a new and better home. Mason Kalfas, put him to work for you. Mason will sit down with you and understand your practice and career or financial goals. He will confidentially discuss your candidacy with law firms that are contenders, not 60-win teams. There is no CBA in the law firm world. Do not be stuck with a poverty franchise like poor Paul Skeens, okay? Call Mason today, located in Washington, D.C. Mason also specializes in working with government lawyers from the DOJ, SEC, FTC, and FDA. He has placed partners at dozens of elite national law firms straight out of those partners' government positions. With the first Biden administration winding down, give Mason Kalfas a call to position yourself for a move to private practice today. You can reach Mason or any of his team of 7 recruiters at 202-486-3535 or email Mason at mason@zenithlegal.com. That's 202-486-3535 or via email at mason@zenithlegal.com. Go Nats! The Nats will be contenders very soon, and you can be a contender even sooner.
Gallo with that open stance deep in the box. The pitch. Swing and a miss. Went to a fastball at 86 miles an hour and strikes out Gallo down for the 3rd time on strikes. And as Marty Brenneman, the Hall of Fame broadcast of the Reds, who was on hand here today for their opener, now retired, used to say, this one belongs to the Reds.
So Josiah Gray in this 8-2 loss at the Reds on Thursday was not good, and the Nats offense was not good. The Nats for this game, just 2 runs, just 6 hits, no walks off us last season harping so much on gotta draw more walks. 0 walks on opening day. Struck out 9 times. How about this? 0 for 1 with runners in scoring position. A mere 1 at-bat with a runner in scoring position the entire game. The Red starting pitcher, Frankie Montas, 6 scoreless innings. The Nats' 2 runs came out of 2-run homer by Eddie Rosario in his Nats regular season debut. He, not Victor Robles, was the Nats starting center fielder. Rosario batted in the number 7 spot, 1 for 3 with a 2-run homer, and that's a 2-run 7th, a 2-out full count 2-run homer to right field to conclude a really nice plate appearance, a 9-pitch plate appearance in which he was down at 1.02. But, you know, in looking at the Nats starting outfield for this game, okay, and again, it's 1 game, right? Who knows to what degree this will be the regular starting outfield, but you had as your starting center fielder a guy in Eddie Rosario who was signed on March 8th to a minor league contract with a non-roster invite to Major League Spring Training, and you had as your starting left fielder and number 3 batter, Jesse Winker, who was signed on February 13th to a minor league contract with a non-roster invite to Major League Spring Training. So 2 of the Nats starting outfielders on opening day were all due respect to them, scrap heap free agents signed in February or March. And as we've talked about, so much of this season, right, is about waiting for the prospects, top two of whom, of course, are outfielders, Dylan Cruz and James Wood. But, man, that does stand out when you take a step back and sort of analyze the opening day lineup, and especially with Winker as your number 3 batter. You know, we know that the organizational hope is for that to not be the long-term situation, but that did stand out to me on Thursday.
Yeah, look, the lineup came out, and I'm not going to say I was surprised necessarily because we saw hints of this over the course of spring training. We saw Rosario play center field at times, and Davey kept making a point to say he believes that he can do that and that he's looking for ways to have a more offensive lineup, especially against right-handers, and that's what they put out there today. And I asked him about 10 days ago or so what he was thinking when it came to the number 3 hitter, and it felt like he was saying essentially Winker or Rosario, whoever might be playing out of those two on a given day, that he likes Joey Meneses hitting behind there to maybe drive in runs. We know Joey Gallo is that all-or-nothing guy who you hope he runs into one. He struck out 3 times in this game. I don't think they're going to trust him in his current state to be a number 3 or 4 hitter. And Keibert Ruiz, who did hit 3rd or 4th a lot last year, the feeling there was that was a lot to throw at him at a young age, as much as they want him working on his catching as well, that he's better suited down in the order hitting 6th, which is where he was for this. So it kind of leaves you by default with whoever's in left field is your number 3 hitter. So again, I was not necessarily surprised by it. I don't think it's a great sign that Jesse Winker, who had a very nice spring and has done stuff in his career, but still, this is not the guy you're thinking of as your classic opening day number 3 hitter. And I'll be interested to see how this plays out over time. The Rosario in center field thing, it's not going to be every day. Victor Robles is still going to play, certainly against lefties, but even against some righties, depending on what the matchups are. I just feel like they're setting themselves up for clearly their worst defensive alignment for this. Rosario has played center field some in his career, but you got to go all the way back to 2016 and 17 when he really did it with any regularity. He's almost exclusively played left field in his career and has played it fairly well. Even beyond that, Joey Gallo is a 2-time Gold Glove winning outfielder who is now playing first base, and Joey Meneses is the DH. Even take the Rosario center field stuff out of the equation here, I could argue that their first base left field DH alignment for this game was not their best alignment. You could still have all 3 guys in the lineup, but if you put Gallo in left, Meneses at first, and Winker, who seems to be the worst fielder of them all, as the DH, you still have all their bats. This isn't an offensive question. I think that's a better defensive arrangement, and I don't think we're going to see that. It looks like Joey Gallo is the first baseman, and Joey Meneses is going to be the DH, and if that means an outfield at times of Winker in left and Rosario in center, so be it. I really think they're hurting themselves. I mentioned last week when we did the season preview that I'm concerned about their defense. It didn't cost them in this game, but I could see that alignment coming back to haunt them at some point.
Well, and especially with all of the lip service that has been paid to defense, we need to be better defensively. And there were coaching staff moves that were made this past offseason that suggested more of a focus on defense. And then you go ahead and start the season like this. Base running is something else to which lip service has been paid. And the aforementioned Jesse Winker on Thursday, 1 for 4 with a single, but also a base running boo-boo. Top of the first, a 2-out full count single to right field, but he then was thrown out at second base in his attempt to stretch the single into a double. And if you did not see the play, Winker was out by a mile. I mean, this wasn't even close. And this goes back to last season. When you are not good offensively, stuff like this gets magnified like tenfold. You know, if the Nats hit home runs and are constantly putting guys on base, a first inning base running blunder doesn't really stick with you, and it's not that big of a deal. But when every run is like this painstaking chore and, you know, you have to get, it feels like 8 hits to score 1 run and that kind of a thing, this stuff does stand out. And again, all the talk about we got to be better on the base pass and, you know, lip service paid to it. And in the first inning of game number 1, we see something like this. It just, if you're a Nats fan, you've seen way too much of this in recent years. And you saw it on opening day in this 2024 season.
Yeah, and I was surprised and kind of disappointed that Davey Martinez defended that decision by Winker. He thought with 2 outs, thought it required a really good throw, that's, you know, worth it with 2 outs to try to get in scoring position. All I can say is from my vantage point, watching it from high above, it was clear he had no chance and did not require a perfect throw to get him. As you said, he was out by a lot. And we're not talking about a speedster here. in Jesse Winker. That to me felt like a guy trying to reprove himself after a couple of down years, a guy who used to play in Cincinnati along with a bunch of others who were on the Nats roster for this game, maybe letting the adrenaline of an opening day get to him and trying to do too much. And that was the last thing they needed in that moment. So that's disappointing. I'm calling it a TOOTBLAN. I think he was thrown out on the bases like an nincompoop. When you make that retreat back to the dugout to end the top of the first inning of the first game like that, sorry, you look like a nincompoop when you do that. And as you said, it's not like they had a whole lot of other chances offensively. You're talking through 6 innings, 4 singles, 0 walks, and obviously 0 runs scored. And that to me, I know Josiah Gray is going to get all the attention because of the home runs he gave up and the struggles he had. But to me, that lineup doing so little, not drawing any walks, not making Frankie Montas throw hardly any pitches along the way, that's probably the most disturbing thing to me, because that's something that you do worry could carry over and isn't just a one-time opening day occurrence.
Joey Meneses did have 2 hits. He is the Nats starting DH and cleanup batter, 2 for 4 with a couple of singles. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, really not much happening. C.J. Abrams starting shortstop, leadoff batter, 0 for 4, 2 strikeouts. Lane Thomas starting right fielder, number 2 batter, 0 for 4, 2 strikeouts. And as Mark mentioned earlier, Joey Gallo starting first baseman, number 5 batter, 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. Hey, Al Galdi here to tell you about Window Nation. March, a big month for the Nats, and March, a big month for windows. If your windows are cracked or leaking, won't open, won't stay open, now is the time to get great new windows from Window Nation, which is offering a terrific deal for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, plus 0 down, 0 interest, and 0 payments for 24 months. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com and make sure that you tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. Window Nation windows come with a lifetime warranty. Window Nation can install your windows in a day or less. Take advantage of this offer. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, plus 0 down, 0 interest, and 0 payments for 24 months. By the time that you start actually paying for your new Window Nation windows, James Wood and Dylan Cruz will be seasoned vets. Call 866-90-NATION or visit windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. And make sure that you tell Window Nation that Al Galdi sent you.
Tim Shover's here to tell you about Game Time. Nats season is about to begin. Opening day coming up next week on Monday afternoon. Time to think about buying tickets again. Make sure to check out Game Time. What's great about the app is that you can see the actual view of all the seats in the venue, Nationals Park included, and it has the lowest price guaranteed. One feature that's great is zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code NATSCHAT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code NATSCHAT, that's NATSCHAT, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Now Pagan to the belt. Meneses on the move, the 3-2. Swinging a long drive to right field. Back on this one, Fraley looking up at the wall, and there it goes. The Nationals are on the board with a long home run for Eddie Rosario. About 10 rows deep into the right field seats in his Nats debut. Home run number 1 and runs number 1 and 2 here in 2024 for the Nationals, courtesy of Eddie Rosario. It's now Cincinnati 7, the Nationals 2.
The Nats bullpen was pretty good. 4 Nats relievers combined to allow 1 run in 4 innings. Robert Garcia looked quite good. A perfect bottom of the 5th, 2 swinging strikeouts. Dylan Floro, a scoreless bottom of the 6th. Matt Barnes, a perfect bottom of the 7th. Tanner Rainey in the bottom of the 8th did give up a run. He gave up a leadoff single and then issued a hit by pitch. Seeing Rainey in what was essentially mop-up duty, does that suggest that he's not part of the quote-unquote A bullpen? Is it more just, hey, this guy barely pitched last season, so let's get him some work? Would you make a Rainey pitching in that spot?
Yeah, I think it was about getting him work. I think, when your starter only goes 4, who else are you going to use? along the way. You weren't going to use Finnegan or Harvey, in this one. They have a day off on Friday, so you can kind of, use guys and know that they're not going to be burned out and unavailable for the day after. So I think it was probably about like, hey, let's get him going in a low pressure situation down a bunch of runs. Now, he was shaky. The fastball is still like low to mid 90s. And he talked about how in spring training, that's the way it always is, but that it almost always picks up when the season begins. I didn't see that from him today. And the command obviously was shaky. It was a little bit of a scary moment when he hit Spencer Steer in the helmet. Again, one game, let's see where it goes. He needs to get into a rhythm now of once again pitching every few days in major league games. I do think because of what he's been through, and it's been a while since he pitched meaningful innings in the big leagues, and given who else they have, I don't think we're going to see Tanner Rainey in really high leverage spots here early on, unless everybody else is burned out. But, the hope would be that he gets back to that. I don't think he's, at the bottom of the totem pole among their relievers.
Well, the Nats, prior to this game, did officially announce their 2024 regular season opening major league roster. Included in that announcement were various placements of various players on various injured lists. And among those players, yes, was Steven Strasburg. We are still dancing the dance that is the Strasburg dance. The Nats on Thursday afternoon announced having placed Strasburg on the 60-day injured list in a continued recovery from thoracic outlet syndrome, for which he underwent surgery in July 2021. If you don't have a calendar in front of you, we are deep into the month of March 2024. The contract impasse continues. It turns out that date of February 26 meant nothing in terms of Strasburg having to report to National Spring Training. And if he didn't report, he was subject to club discipline. Nothing happened. Strasburg never showed. Scott Boras and Steven Strasburg called the Nats bluff on that. Mike Rizzo brought up that date with you guys in a session. I really wonder, does Mike regret saying that? Was he told to say that when he didn't want to say that? Because in hindsight, that looks like such an empty threat that meant nothing. And Boras and Strasburg said, no, we're not showing up. And Strasburg did not show up. But boy, if you would have told me when we ended last season, the Strasburg impasse will continue into the 2024 season, I guess I wouldn't have been shocked, but I sure would have been disappointed, as I'm sure a lot of people listening are. And here we are, 60-day IL for a guy who we know is never pitching again. And this contract situation continues.
Not surprising necessarily. I did think all along that they would work out something over the winter, that you're not going to waste a 40-man roster spot on that. But once they got to spring training and it was clear he wasn't going to show up, and I don't think anybody really thought that, I sort of expected this would just be the case because you now have the rest of the season to keep him on the IL. He doesn't take up a 40-man roster spot because of that. So there's no real urgency now to have to do anything else. I was waiting for this, knowing eventually we were going to have to make the official move. And part of me was wondering, are they going to go to war here and put him on the restricted list, which is essentially them saying, okay, you're in violation of your contract in some way. They didn't do that. I don't think I really expected them to do that. But in the back of your mind, you're like, okay, well, that's about the only other card they have left to play if they really want to play that card. Now, they didn't. I guess that's a good sign, better than the alternative. But yeah, right now, I don't have any reason to believe that anything's going to happen here for a long time. They can keep him on the 60-day IL for the entire season. It won't change anything. We'll get to the offseason, and they'll now have to put him back on the 40-man roster again, use up a spot, and we'll have a discussion again then. But I have no reason to think that anything else is going to happen between now and then, barring some kind of, meeting between all the sides where they agree to something that so far they have not been able to agree to.
I said February 26th. The date was February 24th, but it was on February 14th that Mike Rizzo, in a session with you guys at National Spring Training, said regarding Strasburg, quote, yeah, he's invited like every other guy on our 40-man roster. He's got until February 24th to be here, and yeah, I expect him to be here, end quote. February 24th, per the CBA, the mandatory reporting date for all players invited to a team's major league spring training. Like I said, if you do not report by that date without being excused by the club, you are subject to discipline, although it's not like the club has to impose discipline. But do you think Rizzo just said that like off the cuff? Do you think he planned to say that? Do you think he was told by ownership to say that and like he didn't want to say that? Because it's not a good look when you make a threat like that and then don't follow up on that threat.
I'm sure there was discussion beforehand of like, what are you going to say when the Strasburg question comes up? Because everybody had to know it would be asked at that point. And whether that's exactly what he intended to say or not, I don't know. When we asked him about it again a couple weeks later, he gave a much softer answer, essentially to say, we're still working, talking with his people, and we hope to be able to celebrate his career and honor him the way that he deserves to be celebrated. And, it's a non-answer answer, but at least it doesn't come across as a threat in any way. But as I told you back then, and I've still believed all this time, I don't think there was ever a chance they were going to discipline him if he didn't come. I think they know, certainly Mike Rizzo knows what the situation is, and this is probably coming from above at the ownership level. In some respects, I'm glad that they haven't tried to press that issue, because that's going down a path that's going to lead to, I think, even more harm than they've already inflicted. And whatever you think about what Stephen Strasburg should or should not do, or what the Nationals should or should not do, I think at this point, the best thing is to just play it out, let the contract run out. And, maybe they'll come up with something again next offseason. But for now, there's no harm, I guess, over the course of the season in having him sit on the IL.
In terms of other Nats players on injured lists, Cade Cavalli, starting pitcher, he's on the 60-day IL to begin the season. The Nats this past Tuesday announced putting him on that due to his recovery from Tommy John surgery that he underwent in March 2023. Stone Garrett was placed on an injured list to begin this regular season. Stone Garrett is on the 10-day IL on his recovery from that fractured left fibula, and also a left ankle injury that he suffered last August 23rd. If you remember, that gruesome injury was a 9-1 loss at the New York Yankees last August 23rd. And then a couple of relievers are on the 60-day IL. March 24th, the Nats put Mason Thompson on the 60-day IL. He underwent Tommy John surgery on March 1st. And Jose A. Ferrer on the 60-day IL. He's dealing with an upper back injury. Have you been told of a timeline for Stone Garrett? Because I know that there had been some optimism with him as recently as maybe a few weeks ago, but that optimism seemed to be tempered as spring training went on. And now, obviously, he begins the regular season on the 10-day IL.
Yeah, so at the end of camp, he was playing like 6-7 innings in minor league games. So he was able to do that. I don't know if he was playing every day. I think there was a lot of concern about the recovery from playing those games. And he wasn't up to 9 innings yet. And he certainly wasn't in any major league games. So the plan was to start to try to ramp him up here and see what he can do. And then eventually he gets to a point that they're comfortable with him playing the full 9 innings and doing it every day. Then you can go send him on a rehab assignment with one of the affiliates. So that's still going to be a while. As much as everybody would love to see him come back and be his old self, I think this was always the concern. It's not that he's still injured in any way, but this is a major, major injury to return from, to get back into full baseball shape and to be able to run without any more issues. And some of that is physical, but some of it's also psychological. When you have that happen to you and now you've got to run hard or slide into a base or track back to the wall to catch a fly ball, your mind is kind of telling your body, hold on, I'm not so sure that you should be trying to do this, because look what happened the last time you tried to do it. So there are still some hurdles, I think, for him to overcome. Now, the fact he's on the 10-day instead of the 60-day doesn't mean he's going to be back in 10 days, but it does mean that if he's ready, they can bring him back, later in April or sometime in May. If you're on the 60-day, you're not coming back until early June at that point. The problem here, and I feel for him, but the problem is going to be, there's not going to be a whole lot of time for him, even if he's healthy, to come back and make the case to be playing a lot at the big league level with the outfielders they brought in during spring training and with the outfielders we know who are coming later this season. I'm just not sure how much opportunity there's going to be for playing time for Stone Garrett. I felt like all along his only real hope was to make the opening day roster. Maybe that was his motivation to try to do it. Clearly, he wasn't ready for that. And you do wonder where this leads to, because opportunities are going to be few and far between by the time he truly is ready to play.
Yeah. And, last season, it's not like he was brought here to be a regular starter. To his credit, he batted well to where he became this key offensive presence as the summer went on. And we actually had conversations of, boy, the Nats do miss Stone Garrett because he was hitting well when he got injured last August. Well, no game for the Nats on Friday due to the usual off day after a team's regular season home opener. So final 2 games of this 3-game series are on Saturday and Sunday. Game 2 Saturday afternoon, 4:10. Patrick Corbin will be the Nats starting pitcher, and Game 3 Sunday afternoon at 1:40. Jake Irvin will be the Nats starting pitcher. This episode of the podcast for opening day, brought to us by Mason Kalfas at Zenith Legal. Mason Kalfas and his team specialize in placing partners and associates at medium-sized and large law firms in Washington, D.C. and across the country. Mason's number is 202-486-3535. You could also check out his website, zenithlegal.com. Hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can email the show, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat are courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. A thank you to Tim Newmark for the Nats Chat podcast music. Check out his site, timnewmark.com. For Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the Nats Chat podcast.
Hello and welcome to the all-new Football Vision podcast. My name is Phil Costa and I will be your host as we aim to add yet another show to your weekly routine. We're set on covering all the best stories from European football and beyond, with insight, opinions, and hopefully some laughs from experts who simply know their subjects best. You can find us in all the usual places, and we've got some great guests in the pipeline, so do stick around for the ride.